Have you ever played a game and thought, I wonder where they come up with the idea for this? Well, so have we. Games are born from a simple idea and inspiration and slowly formulate into something great, spectacular, and even game-changing. Get it? But because game development is a long and often gruesome process, some games don't always look the same from idea to finished product. While most have major changes here and there are a few games whose process is a little bit more, shall we say, wonky. I'm Brittany with the Leaderboard, and today we found 6 games that would be much different if their original designs have been kept. Though maybe it'll change from when this is being written to the final video. I don't know. Number 6, HalfLife. HalfLife and its sequels are as iconic as they are interesting. Originally released in 1998, it introduced a first-person shooter without cutscenes and a modified version of the original Quake game engine. With the rise of PC gaming, a modding community was born out of it, bringing hundreds of modified game types for fans to enjoy. It's only natural that a few would stand out amongst the others. What many didn't account for were the creators of the games were actually taking notice as well, which allowed for several of the games to become full retail releases. This includes the likes of Counter-Strike, a team deathmatch game type that added in a bomb placing and defusal element, which eventually became one of the biggest competitive FPS games of all time. Team Fortress, a team battle that added in character classes that eventually evolved into the violently hilarious game we love today. That sequel had its own long story of development, but that's another story. The Stanley Parable, a mod of Half-Life 2 that pits you as a lowly office worker whose life takes a lot of twists and turns thanks to a malevolent narrator who might not have your best intentions in mind. The Ship, a competitive murder mystery game where it's kill or be killed on board of a cruise ship, which is also formerly a mod of Half-Life 2. And of course, no list of Half-Life mods would be complete without Gary's Mod, a program that allows anyone to create game type scenes, situations, or even just blow stuff up. After a long time as a free mod, it was eventually released commercially for the benefit of both Valve and the makers of the mod. And there are several others beyond those. Valve really loves its fans, don't they? 5. Pokemon Snap Photography Background. Pokemon Snap is probably one of the more popular Pokemon spin-off games amongst fans, despite only having the single game to its name. Though, if fans had their way, there would already have been a sequel. In it, you play Todd Snap, a Pokemon photographer who travels around an island holding dozens of different types of Pokemon, taking hundreds of pictures along the way. Though unique, it wasn't the original plan for the game. To explain the history of Snap's development, we have to look at one of Nintendo's few failures, the Nintendo 64 DD. It was a disc-based expansion for the 64, not unlike the Sega CD add-on for the Genesis. Considering that it's only a comparison point, you can probably guess how it worked out. But since the disc drive gave the system more power and space to make games, Nintendo asked developers to make software that showed off its new capabilities. HAL Laboratory, creator of Kirby and Super Smash Bros., began to work on a game that allowed the player to take photographs of wildlife and plant life on an island. Though pretty and inventive, the point of the game was generally unclear. As former Nintendo president Satoru Iwata pointed out, with the lack of direction and failing of the 64DD accessory, it was suggested to add in Pokemon as a focus instead of real animals. This gave new life to the project, and as developer Masanobu Yamamoto explained, that time adopting the Pokemon world clarified what we should do and the direction we should head. And I came to like Pokemon, so I felt like that had saved us. And to the rest, as I say, is Poke history. Sorry, I had to say it. Number 4, Resident Evil 4 was almost much crazier. Resident Evil 4 is a highly acclaimed game revitalizing a franchise that had been flagging over the last several years before its release, along with revolutionizing the survival horror and third-person shooter genres. And now that it's been released on nearly a dozen consoles since its initial GameCube premiere, it's hard to believe it being different than the original version we saw. Despite that, the original version of Resident Evil 4 might be one of the more surprising ones on this list. After being hinted at in 1999, the game underwent heavy development for several years, the most major version being produced by Hideki Kamiya, who at the time had just directed Resident Evil 2. He had come up with the idea of making the new Resident Evil cool and stylish, giving it a more Hollywood-like story presentation. Kamiya's build had a story focused on the invincible man named Tony, with several supernatural skills and intellect beyond a regular person. Along with this, the camera was made more dynamic, the gameplay was geared towards being action-oriented, and the general feel of the game was made more gothic, with several places in the UK and Spain being used as inspiration. When showed to producer Shinji Mikami, he disapproved of the changes, feeling like it strayed too far from the survival horror roots and didn't feel at all like Resident Evil, forcing them to scrap the entire idea and start over. So after all that, Kamiya was left with a game concept that he couldn't use. What was a man to do? Well, his idea was to turn the zombies into demons and change the main character from Tony to Dante. And Hold on, I'm getting to it. Devil May Cry was born, being released on the PlayStation 2 in August 2001, spawning its own several-part franchise. Life is funny that way sometimes, huh? Number 3, Super Smash Bros. The year is 1998. The Nintendo 64 is doing pretty well, and HAL Laboratories is looking to produce a new game. Masahiro Sakurai had something he wanted to make, a fighting game that 4 people could play simultaneously. He pitched the idea to coworker Satoru Iwata, though he didn't have many ideas yet and simply used the characters as stand-ins, calling the initial idea Dragon King, the fighting game. Knowing the game probably wouldn't do well with the current layout, Sakurai had the idea of creating the game using established Nintendo characters as the fighters. And usually that's the spark that creates a classic game, right? Well, there was one major issue with that plan. Nintendo, being a rather conservative and tightly knit company, would never approve of something of that nature. So what would a good employee do in that situation? Well, Sakurai just went ahead and did it anyways. Without asking permission from Nintendo, he designed the game using Mario, Samus, Donkey Kong, and Fox, making sure everything was balanced and worked perfectly before showing Nintendo. Despite the rather underhanded way it was handled, Nintendo approved of the production and it ended up becoming a smash hit among players. Though, I'm betting Sakurai got a rather stern "don't do that again" from Nintendo after that. Number 2, Arkham Asylum. Up until a few years ago, making a good Batman game was not considered an easy task. Batman, like many of his DC counterparts, had a bit of a rocky history when it came to video game adaptations. The only person having worse luck than him is his pal Superman. But when Rocksteady was able to get their hands on the license, they took the concept of Batman and ran with it, creating one of the best comic adaptations ever to grace the console platform. But if you played the initial build of it, you'd probably be wondering what were they thinking. When first designing the game, it was decided the game needed a new style of fighting. After some brainstorming, the initial solution was to make it rhythm-based, complete with music and red circles that would appear as you attacked. Now, while dance-based violence might seem laughable to those who've never played the Arkham games, to those who have, the fight system currently in the game might actually make a bit of sense. Though it doesn't have the groovy tunes or helpful DDR-like indicators, the fighting in Arkham is definitely rhythmic in a sense that each hit works like a general beat structure, and fights go a lot smoother when you get a flow going. So yeah, you can thank games like DDR and Guitar Hero for inspiring one of the best comic book action games out there. Maybe the next sequel will have Batman doing a guitar solo. Number 1, Donkey Kong. Today, when you talk about Donkey Kong and Mario, most consider them to be cornerstones of gaming, the earliest examples of notable game characters and possibly the first games you've played. But, as you can probably tell by this point on the list, it was almost quite a bit different than the barrel-swinging monkey and the jumping plumber that we have come to love and know to this day. The story starts in 1981, and Nintendo was attempting to export a game by the name of Radar Scope. But because of saturation in the video game market at the time, the game never took hold. This left Nintendo with a bunch of extra arcade cabinets and no other plans for them. So then President Hiroshi Yamauchi talked to a young industrial designer about making the games to fill those cabinets, giving him a $100,000 budget to do so. So what makes this particular development interesting? Well, at the same time as this planning was happening, Nintendo was trying to finalize another deal to make a video game adaptation of the spinach-eating sailor, Popeye. With that in mind, Miyamoto designed a game where the 3 main characters of Popeye could fit in, a game where Popeye climbs the gutters to rescue olive oil from Bluto. Unfortunately, for Nintendo, at the time the license fell through and they were without a story or characters for the new game. Not deterred though, Miyamoto soldiered on, replacing Bluto with an angry ape, Olive Oil was a lady in a red dress named Pauline, and Popeye was eventually replaced by a hopping man known as Jumpman, though he eventually got it legally changed to Mario when he got the Mushroom Kingdom. Just think though, had there not been a contract dispute, we might all be making fan art of Popeye and cosplay of Olive Oil. There you have it, 6 bizarre origins of video games. Do you know of any games with any cool origin stories? Let us know in the comments below, and if you like this video, be sure to check out some of our other videos. We have new ones dropping every week. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the Leaderboard where we help you game smarter.